Hey everyone, it's me, Taehyung. I've been sitting here for a while, staring at this blank screen, wondering how to start, how to say what I've wanted to say for so long without it sounding wrong, without it hurting anyone or worse, without it being misunderstood. I've always tried to keep things light, fun, playful, the Taehyung that everyone knows. Smiling in photos, joking in interviews, the member who makes everyone laugh. But behind all that, there's me. The me that's scared. The me that hides. The me that loves too much, too deeply, and sometimes too quietly. I wanted to say thank you first. Thank you for being here, for waiting, for loving, for understanding even when you couldn't. I know this isn't going to be easy to hear. I know some of you might be shocked, confused, maybe even hurt, but I need to say it anyway because the truth has been sitting in my chest for years and it's heavier than I can carry alone. And I want you to understand not just the story of what happened, but the heart behind it, the feelings that never had a voice until now. So I'm going to be honest, completely honest, for the first time in a very long time. This isn't just about me, it's about the people I care about, the choices I made, the moments I almost let slip away, and the love I've held onto quietly, even when it scared me. I know many of you have seen glimpses, little smiles, moments in videos, fleeting glances that might have meant more than you realized, but this is me telling everything. The real story, without filters, without jokes, without hiding. And I want you to know, as my fans, my family, my friends, who've stayed with me through every stage, every performance, every high note, and every late night struggle, this is me trusting you with my heart. This is me saying you'll see the me you don't see on stage, the me who worries, who feels, who loves, who almost made choices that would have changed everything. I'm sharing this because you've supported me in ways I can't even put into words, and you deserve to know me fully, not just the parts that are easy to love, but the parts that hurt, that falter, that hide in shadows. So please, listen with your hearts as I tell this story. Not as a scandal, not as drama, but as truth. Because what I'm about to share, it's been inside me for years, waiting, trembling, hoping for a moment like this. And now, here we are. I could hear my heartbeat louder than the crowd. People were laughing, cheering, holding their signs, waving light sticks, but somehow everything around me felt muted, like I was underwater. I'd been on stages my whole life, but tonight felt different. My palms wouldn't stop sweating. My throat felt tight. I knew what I was about to say would change everything. I knew the world wasn't ready, and neither was I. But keeping it inside for years had become unbearable. The host asked the question so casually, like it meant nothing. Have you ever come close to marriage? Everyone laughed. They expected me to dodge or joke, the way idols are expected to do. But the moment I heard that question, something inside me cracked. It was like the universe was finally tired of watching me pretend that I didn't love someone with my entire heart. I just stared at my hands for a moment. My fingers were trembling, and I tried to hide it by adjusting my mic, but I know the camera caught it. My breathing wasn't steady. The host was waiting, the audience waiting, millions watching live, and suddenly I heard my own voice before I had time to think. I almost got engaged. My chest tightened the moment I said it. I could feel the entire studio freeze. Even the fans who normally scream at every little gesture went silent. I didn't look at the host because I knew I would lose it if I saw his shock. Instead, I kept my eyes on the floor at the reflection of the stage lights against the polished surface. The host tried to speak, and for a second his voice cracked. To who? That question hit me like lightning. I didn't want to say his name, not because I was ashamed, God. Never, but because saying his name out loud meant the world would finally realize everything we had tried so hard to protect. And also because I wasn't sure he wanted to be dragged back into my life after everything we went through. But the truth has weight, and it finally became heavier than my fear. I lifted my eyes. I could feel the heat building behind them, but I refused to cry. Not here, not yet. Jeon Jungkook. The moment the name left my lips, the audience gasped. Someone dropped something backstage. The host's hand flew to his mouth. The studio lights suddenly felt blinding. I could tell the production crew didn't know whether to cut to commercial or keep rolling. But they didn't. They let the cameras stay pointed at me because they could feel it. This wasn't gossip. This wasn't a scandal. This was a man finally breaking open after years of silence. My voice was shaking, but I didn't stop. I bought the ring. I practiced what I was going to say. I spent weeks planning the perfect moment, and I still walked away. My chest burned. My throat felt raw. I could hear whispers from the audience, some emotional, some confused, some devastated. I didn't blame them. I barely understood it myself. It had been the happiest and most painful moment of my life. I continued, not because the host asked, but because after holding it in for so long, it felt impossible to stop. I was so in love with him, I couldn't see anything else. But I was so afraid of ruining everything we had worked for. The pressure, the spotlight, the expectations. I convinced myself that loving him openly would destroy his dreams. So I chose to protect him by breaking both of our hearts. My lips were shaking too hard now. I swallowed, trying to stay composed. The host didn't interrupt. The world was watching, and I could feel every pair of eyes on me, yet I had never felt more alone. I didn't say I love you enough. I didn't fight hard enough. I walked away from the one person who would have chosen me no matter what. A small tear hit my hand before I even realized it had fallen, and I regret it every single day. I looked straight into the camera not because I had to, but because if Jungkook was somewhere out there watching, I needed him to hear every word clearly. You are the only person I ever wanted to marry. And I still don't know if walking away was the right decision or the biggest mistake of my life. The studio stayed silent. No one dared breathe. No one clapped. No one whispered. The entire world was frozen, and all I could think was that somewhere out there, Jungkook might be watching my confession as live as everyone else. And if he was, I had no idea whether he was crying or furious or relieved or breaking all over again. All I knew was that the love I buried refused to stay silent any longer. Tonight I said his name. Now the world knew. But the real question was, would he come back? Or had I already lost him forever? The silence after I said his name felt heavier than any applause I had ever received. The studio lights seemed too bright, the audience too still, the cameras too close. And yet, I couldn't take my eyes off the floor, couldn't let myself see the reactions, couldn't let the world see the trembling. I tried to hide behind my sweater. I had rehearsed this 1,000 times in my mind. I thought I'd be calm, articulate, even charming. But speaking Jungkook's name aloud, admitting the truth for everyone to see, stripped all of that away. What remained was raw, exposed, undeniable. The host, finally finding her voice, whispered, "Taehyung, why now?" Her tone was gentle, but there was no mistaking the shock behind her eyes. She knew, just like I did, that what I was about to reveal went beyond a celebrity confession. This was human, fragile, urgent. I breathed in slowly, feeling the weight of years pressing down. "Because I can't pretend anymore," I said. My voice was low, almost a whisper, but it carried through the studio, into the microphones, and out to the millions of viewers who were now witnessing my heart unravel in real time. I've been pretending I was okay, pretending that walking away was the right choice, pretending that I could survive without him. But I can't. I never could. I looked up for the first time and allowed my gaze to meet the camera. Somewhere I hoped Jungkook was watching. Somewhere I hoped he could feel the desperation and the love behind every word. "I almost proposed to him," I said, swallowing hard against the lump in my throat. I had the ring in my pocket. I had rehearsed the words. I thought I was ready, but I chickened out. I felt my hands clench under the table. I could see the faint shimmer of the tear tracks on my face, the trembling in my fingers, the vulnerability I could no longer hide. My heart raced as I continued, my voice raw and uneven. I let fear dictate my actions. I convinced myself I was protecting him, but all I did was betray myself. The host reached out, but I didn't flinch. I didn't need comfort, I needed honesty. I needed the world to see the truth, the part of me I had locked away for too long. "And the truth is," I whispered, my voice breaking, "I have never stopped loving him, not for a second, not even when I tried." I paused, drawing in a shaky breath, letting the words hang in the air. The studio was still. The audience, the crew, the cameras, every eye was on me. But it all faded into a blur. I was no longer performing, I was confessing. I was living the consequences of years of secrecy, of stolen glances, hidden touches, unspoken dreams. I wanted to marry him, I admitted, voice barely above a whisper. I wanted a life with him, a quiet life, away from the cameras, away from the expectations. But I let myself believe I wasn't worthy. I let myself believe that by stepping back, I was protecting him. But in reality, I was protecting my own cowardice. Tears slipped down my cheeks, and this time I didn't wipe them away. They fell freely, a physical manifestation of the guilt and love I had carried silently for years. Every time I saw him laugh, every time our hands brushed by accident, every time we shared a moment I couldn't name, I held it in because I was afraid, I said. Afraid of what people would think, afraid of losing him, afraid of losing everything. I closed my eyes for a moment, allowing the memories to wash over me. Hotel rooftops under cherry blossoms, stolen hotel room nights, moments of quiet intimacy between rehearsals, the words I never dared say, the letters I wrote but burned in a drunken haze. Every memory was a scar and a treasure simultaneously. And yet, I did nothing, I continued. I stayed silent when I should have spoken. I ran away when I should have fought. I thought I was protecting us, but all I did was let the time slip away, let the fear rule, let the world dictate what we could or could not feel. I looked back at the camera and my gaze hardened, filled with a quiet resolve. I am saying this now because I can't bear the weight of it any longer. I am not asking for forgiveness. I am not asking for sympathy. I am asking for him to know. For him to know that I loved him, that I love him, and that I am sorry for every moment I let fear dictate what should have been ours. I leaned back slightly, letting the words settle in the air, feeling the tremor in my hands, in my chest, in my soul. I had said it, I had spoken the name, I had bared my heart to the world, and there was no taking it back. Now the waiting began. The waiting to see if he would hear me, if he would forgive me, if he would come back, or if I had lost him forever. The studio remained frozen. The host reached across the table, finally placing a hand on mine. "Thank you," she said softly. I didn't respond. I was lost in thought, imagining him somewhere, alone, hearing the confession that had been years in the making. Somewhere, I prayed, he understood. Somewhere, I hoped he felt the same ache, the same longing, the same love that had driven me to finally speak. And in that moment, with the lights glaring, the cameras rolling, the audience holding their breath, I realized something terrifying and exhilarating at the same time. The world was watching, but my heart wasn't theirs to judge. My heart belonged to him. Always had, always would. The studio remained suspended in a fragile stillness, the kind of silence that weighs on your chest and makes every breath feel deliberate. My confession had landed, not like a ripple, but like a tidal wave, and I could feel it pressing against me from every angle: the cameras, the microphones, the unseen eyes of millions around the world. And yet, as intense as it was, my focus was elsewhere. It was on him. Jungkook? The name I had whispered into the world was not just a name. It was a lifetime of memories, regrets, and unspoken promises. I traced the edge of the table with my fingertips, the wood cool beneath my skin, grounding me as my mind replayed that Tokyo rooftop over and over. The night I had planned to ask, the ring burning a hole in my coat pocket, the cherry blossom petals swirling in the wind, and Jungkook's laugh untamed, bright, unaware of the storm my heart was about to unleash. I hadn't asked, I had frozen. And I had lived with that decision every single day since. The host, sensing the gravity of the moment, gave me space, her notebook untouched on her lap. I could feel her eyes on me, but they were secondary. The real audience was the one I couldn't see, Jungkook, wherever he was. I imagined him sitting somewhere, maybe in his apartment, hearing my words and feeling their weight. Could he even breathe? Could he understand that everything I had ever done, every choice I had made, had been tangled with fear? and love in equal measure? I finally raised my eyes to the camera, my voice a tremulous whisper. I kept thinking I was protecting him, that the right choice was to step back, to stay silent, to let the world dictate what we could feel. My lips quivered, the confession tasting bitter and sweet all at once. But in reality, I was protecting myself from facing the truth, from facing him, from facing what I wanted more than anything. The audience may have seen me as vulnerable as a celebrity breaking down on live television, but to me, it was something far deeper. It was about reclaiming honesty in a life dictated by perfection, by schedules, by expectations. I thought if I kept my distance, I could keep him safe. I admitted, but all I did was let him drift, let us drift apart. I paused, letting the weight of the confession settle in the room. My fingers trembled beneath the table as I swallowed the lump in my throat. I imagined him replaying my words in his mind, seeing the tears I couldn't hide, hearing the hesitation in my voice. Every fiber of me ached to reach through the distance and bridge the years of silence, the stolen moments, the words never said. I almost lost him, I whispered, my voice breaking. Not to someone else, not to fate, but to my own fear. The host's voice, soft and careful, broke the fragile spell. Taehyung, do you think he knew? I closed my eyes, remembering the nights when we had sat across from each other, pretending that nothing mattered, pretending that we were just friends, pretending that our stolen glances were meaningless. I had always known that he sensed my feelings, that he knew more than I let on. But I had waited for him to speak first, and he had stayed silent, just as I had. I knew, I confessed quietly, but I was waiting for him to ask, waiting for him to give me permission to say what I wanted to say, and I never got that chance. My chest tightened as the memory hit me again, the way he had looked at me that night in Tokyo, the warmth of his smile that didn't quite reach his eyes, the weight of a love that neither of us dared name aloud. And now I am saying it because I can't carry it anymore. I leaned back slightly, running a hand through my hair, feeling the tension in my shoulders. I loved him more than I could ever explain, more than I could ever justify. And I never stopped, not for a second. Even when the distance grew, even when the schedules tore us apart, even when I convinced myself that I was doing the right thing, my heart stayed with him. A single tear slipped down my cheek, catching the studio lights, and I let it fall. There was no shame, no regret in its descent, just truth. I almost asked him to spend his life with me. I whispered again. I almost, but I didn't, and I've been haunted by that almost ever since. The host leaned forward slightly, but I didn't see her. I saw him. I saw the moment when he would hear, the moment when he would understand that every hesitation, every retreat, every painful silence had been layered with love, fear, and devotion. I didn't choose the world over him. I said, my voice raw, trembling. I chose fear over courage, and for that I will always regret it. And then, with all the weight of a confession years in the making, I said it, my voice breaking, my chest burning. Jungkook, I am yours. Always have been, always will be. I only hope that it isn't too late. The studio was suspended in that moment, the audience holding its collective breath. The cameras didn't move. The host didn't speak. The microphones captured my words and sent them hurtling across continents and oceans, into homes, into hearts, into Jungkook's ears. Somewhere I knew he was listening. Somewhere I hoped he was feeling the same raw ache I had just exposed. And for the first time in years, I felt a flicker of something I hadn't allowed myself to feel in a long time by hope. The room felt impossibly still after my confession, yet in that stillness everything was loud. Every heartbeat, every shallow breath, every rustle of clothing seemed amplified. My hands were trembling as I rested them on my knees, but I couldn't bring myself to look down. I had already laid my soul bare, and now all that remained was the waiting, waiting for him, waiting for the world, waiting for the consequences of a truth long buried. I imagined him there, wherever he was, hearing my words as if they were an echo bouncing directly from my chest into his Jungkook. I could see his face in my mind, pale in the glow of a screen, jaw tight, eyes wide with disbelief, confusion, maybe even pain. The thought of him, just him, filled every corner of my chest, suffocating and yet grounding me at the same time. I had never spoken so openly, never allowed the raw, unfiltered weight of my heart to exist in front of anyone until now. The host's voice came softly, almost hesitant. Taehyung, what made you decide to say it now? I paused, searching for words that could explain a decision that had been years in the making. Because I couldn't do it silently anymore. Because every day I waited, every day I convinced myself it wasn't the right time. I was lying. To him, to myself, to everyone. I was lying and I'm done. I leaned back, eyes momentarily closing as the memory of that Tokyo night returned with sharp clarity. The ring in my pocket, the cherry blossom petals brushing against our cheeks, the wind tangling our hair, and his laugh, untamed and bright, tearing through the still night. I had rehearsed the words over and over, but when it came down to it, fear had frozen me. I hadn't asked. I had let the world, the schedules, the expectations dictate my silence. And now, years later, I was finally admitting it, not for the cameras, not for the audience, but because it was killing me to remain hidden in my own cowardice. My throat tightened as I thought about the nights I spent alone, replaying stolen moments in my head, the brush of his hand during rehearsals, the nights we stayed awake on hotel rooftops, arguing and laughing, moments that seemed meaningless to the outside world but had been everything to me. Every glance, every touch, every unspoken word had carried weight I had never dared admit. I almost asked him to marry me, I whispered again, voice breaking under the weight of confession. I almost, but I didn't. And I've lived with that almost every day since. The microphones captured it all, and I knew it was traveling across the world in real time, searing into the hearts of millions. But the distance from the camera meant nothing compared to the distance I had created between Jungkook and myself. I had left a gap of years, of silence, of uncertainty, and now I was trying to close it with words that could never truly undo the past. I imagined his hands, trembling, maybe clenching a phone, maybe hovering over a screen, trying to decide whether to respond. I imagined the way his chest might tighten, the way he might swallow hard against a lump in his throat, the storm of emotions that would crash over him as he heard me say what I had never had the courage to say in person. I loved him, I confessed, voice barely audible even to me. I love him. I have always loved him, and I always will. The host was silent, giving space, letting the words hang in the air like fragile glass. I looked up at the camera again, not for the audience, but for him wherever he was. Jungkook, I whispered, the name breaking through years of restraint. I'm yours. I've always been yours. I didn't know how to say it. I didn't know how to be brave enough. But I'm done hiding. I can't lie anymore. Tears spilled freely now, unchecked, warm against my cheeks. It wasn't for sympathy. It wasn't for validation. It was the only way I could finally exhale the years of tension, regret, fear, and longing that had become a second heartbeat in my chest. The cameras captured it, the world would see it, but it didn't matter. This was for him, for us, for the truth that had been buried under fame, expectations, and silence for far too long. I closed my eyes for a moment, taking in the weight of what I had done. I had exposed my heart to the world, stripped of all protection, and in doing so, I had also opened the possibility for something I had long feared: confrontation, reckoning, maybe even rejection. But I had to try, I had no choice. Love had been patient for years, and now it demanded honesty. I'm sorry, I whispered into the microphone, though it wasn't for anyone else. I'm sorry for the silence. I'm sorry for the distance. I'm sorry for all the moments we could have had but didn't. I'm sorry for letting fear guide me instead of courage. But I love you, Jungkook. I always have and I always will. The silence that followed was deafening, yet filled with an unspoken connection that the cameras and the world could never fully capture. It was a bridge built from truth, a fragile thread stretching across time, space, and misunderstanding. And for the first time in years, I allowed myself to hope that maybe, just maybe, he had heard and maybe he understood. The world outside could collapse, headlines could scream, and millions could speculate. But in this room, it was just us, or at least just the idea of him and me. My chest ached with a combination of relief and fear. Every nerve felt exposed, raw, and yet there was a strange lightness in finally letting it out. I had been carrying this weight for years, silently, carefully, like a precious yet dangerous secret. And now it was no longer hidden. I imagined him staring at his screen, reading my words, feeling the tremor of my heart through the distance that separated us. Jungkook. Even saying his name aloud made my chest tighten in anticipation. Would he understand? Would he forgive? Or would he shut the door that I had left open for so long? The host's voice was barely audible over my own heartbeat. Taehyung, what now? I swallowed hard. The words stuck somewhere between my throat and my lips. What now? The question was a mirror, reflecting my own uncertainty. What now, indeed, when the truth had finally surfaced, and everything I had built to protect us, the carefully curated image, the constant control, the rehearsed smiles, was unraveling in front of the world. I could feel the weight of history pressing against my shoulders. Every hotel rooftop, every late night rehearsal, every stolen glance, every touch that lingered too long, they all demanded acknowledgement. I couldn't change the past. I couldn't undo the fear that had frozen me in place. But I could speak, I could try. That was all I had left. That and the hope that he might still hear me, might still see me, might still care. I I need him to know, I whispered, voice breaking. Even if it's too late, even if it changes everything, even if it destroys me, he needs to know how much he's always meant to me. I pictured him standing there, maybe pacing, maybe frozen, maybe torn between disbelief and a longing that mirrored my own. I had never been so intimate with anyone in my life, and yet we had shared everything silently for years. The thought of breaking that silence, of putting it into words for the first time, was terrifying, but the alternative was worse. The alternative was a lifetime of regret, of imagining 1,000 what ifs, of burying my heart in shadow and shame. The memories hit me in waves. The cherry blossom petals in Tokyo, his laughter echoing against the city lights, the brush of our hands during rehearsals that neither of us could pull away from. The nights spent awake on hotel rooftops, sharing stories, arguments, confessions, and laughter. All those moments, so precious, so raw, so ours, had been overshadowed by fear, and now fear had been replaced by revelation. I almost I almost asked him to marry me. I admitted again, voice trembling under the weight of years of unspoken words. I had the ring, I had the words, but I didn't. And I've carried that silence for too long. I can't anymore. The air seemed to shift as I spoke, heavy with anticipation, heavy with the ghosts of our past. Every word hung in the room, delicate and dangerous, a thread connecting the present to all the moments I had lost. And somewhere in the distance, I imagined him hearing, understanding, and maybe, just maybe, feeling the same ache, the same longing, the same desperate hope that had haunted me for years. I took a deep breath, letting the words roll off my tongue, letting them spill into the microphone without filter, without shame, without pretense. Jungkook, I love you. I have always loved you. And I've been too afraid to say it. But I can't stay silent anymore. I need you to know. Tears slipped freely now, unchecked. Not for sympathy, not for attention, but for the sheer relief of honesty. The cameras, the lights, the world outside it didn't matter. All that mattered was the bridge I had thrown across the distance, the lifeline of truth connecting my heart to his, hoping against hope that it would be caught. I imagined him finally picking up the phone, typing, hesitating, unsure if he was ready, if he could handle the weight of my confession. And then maybe, just maybe, he would say the words I had longed to hear for years. Maybe he would say, I know, I've always known, I've always felt the same. The seconds stretched into eternity. Every breath was a countdown. Every heartbeat a reminder of the risk, the exposure, the vulnerability. And yet, for the first time in years, I felt free. Free because I had finally spoken the truth. Free because no matter what happened next, my love was no longer hidden. My heart was no longer silent. I glanced at the host, her eyes wide but gentle. No questions, no judgment, just presence. She knew this wasn't an interview anymore. This was a confession, a reckoning, a reclaiming of something that had been stolen by fear, expectation, and time. I leaned forward slightly, resting my hands together, feeling the tremor in my fingers. This isn't for the cameras, I said softly, though they captured every word. This isn't for the audience. This is for him, for us, for the truth. The air felt electric now, alive with the weight of unspoken possibilities. Somewhere I imagined him hearing me, feeling me, understanding me. And for the first time in years, I allowed myself to believe that maybe, just maybe, the silence between us could finally be broken. And now, here we are, at the end of this story, or maybe the beginning of a new one. I can feel every heartbeat, every breath, every memory that led me to this moment. I've said what I needed to say, and yet the words feel both heavy and freeing at the same time. They float in the air around me, and for the first time in years, I can breathe without carrying the weight of silence. I've told you the truth, and it's terrifying, because truth is always terrifying, but it's also real, and real is stronger than fear. I realized something important through this confession, that love, in all its forms, is never simple. It's messy, complicated, and sometimes painful. But it's also beautiful, precious, and worth every risk. Thank you for listening. Thank you for believing. Thank you for staying. And thank you for allowing me to be real. From here on, I'll walk forward without hiding, with every scar, every smile, and every heartbeat fully mine. This is me, Taehyung, finally saying what I should have said a long time ago. And I hope in some small way it helps you find the courage to say your own truth too.